We're live.
Nice.
Hi, everyone. We're live.
Nice.
Welcome to another Predictable Revenue live stream. We're so excited to have you all hopping on the stream today to hear us chat about how to define your ideal customer profile, how to find out who to prospect. Maybe we could do like a little intro. Patricia, if you want to go.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm one of the account managers / strategists here at PR. So we spend a ton of time working with ICP, Ideal Client Profile, because it's how we structure essentially our entire workflow and what we do. So my job is definitely with a new client to dig into not only their solution or their product or service, but also take a deep dive to really understand who they're targeting. Do they know who they're targeting? How do we narrow that focus? How do we expand that focus? And so we spend a lot of time internally chatting about this, strategizing around ICP, because it is vitally important with outbound to have a clear understanding what that looks like. So we spend a lot of time working on that.
Yeah, and I am Sarah Hicks. I'm the senior outbound SDR at Predictable Revenue, also podcast host. That's why I'm hopping in for Colin today to host this live stream, but really excited to kind of be both a practitioner and a host on this one because I, of course, am doing the outbound outreach for Predictable Revenue. So I have to understand our ideal customer profile like the back of my hand. I have to understand kind of everything that affects it, how it evolves over time. And then, as Patricia said, because our execution side is going to help customers with their ideal customer profile, I need to get a sense of who any prospects I'm talking to, who they're targeting, whether they know who they're targeting, whether they need help in that regard. And then I can hand them over to the experts like Patricia.
That's it.
Yeah. So we have a really nice kind of overview for you guys today. I'll give you kind of a rundown of the trajectory this conversation is going to take. And of course, you guys know that you can email if you want to kind of chime in and ask questions, and we'll bring you into the live and we'll answer those questions for you. But this is kind of the overview. So we're going to talk about where to start. If you have some customers, you've had some success, but now you really want to start with outbound. So you need to know who you should be focusing on. We'll talk about how to start, how to figure that out from there. We'll talk about the difference between the customers that come to you through inbound and the customers that you should be going after through outbound. We will talk about some kind of practical applications once you've defined this ideal customer profile. So how to target them, what to use to kind of capitalize on this newfound ideal customer profile. And finally, we'll talk about the continued development of your ideal customer profile because it is never finished. As I mentioned a little bit a couple seconds ago there, it's kind of constantly in evolution. Things might impact it, so you need to keep working on it. It's not something that you can just like one and done. There we go. So we'll talk about that as well. And it looks like is that Margot Robbie?
I wish.
Yeah, I wish.
Sarah.
Awesome. Hi. Hi, everybody. Oh yeah. Much more famous, much more accomplished. You guys should be lucky.
There.
Awesome. Well, so great to have you guys all on the line. Looks like we've got people from San Jose, California. Yeah, a couple people from California. Yeah, looking forward to it. Why don't we just get right into it? We'll start off, as I mentioned, on the kind of where to start piece. So this is you've got some customers, you've had some success, and now you want to figure out how to really hone in on who that perfect customer is so that you can target them through outbound. Let's talk about where we start. One of the places that we start, Patricia, with our customers is kind of customer interviews. Tell me how you have our clients leverage that to figure out their ICP.
100%. So a lot of times people come to us with sort of a general idea of who their current client base is. And so what we ask them to do, if it's something they haven't already done, is really do an in-depth and thorough interview of those customers that they currently have. So understanding, why did you come to us? A word of mouth referral can be a little bit different simply because they're coming with the anticipation of like, oh, I know someone who's had a really great experience with you, so I feel confident you can help me. But the people that are organically finding you, interview what it is that their problems that they're facing internally, why they went looking for you, what solutions do they have, especially if it's a critical time, if someone is like in desperate need to sign the check and, hand over their business to you. Why is that so vitally important? Because what we're able to do with that is take a look at, okay, so this is the title, persona, the industry they're working in. And then we're able to structure, we use something, we do like a niche workshop with a client, but we're able to structure our thoughts for outbound around what is currently working for you, especially if you don't have an outbound sort of set up, like solution set up for yourself already. You're new to the idea of it. You're not really sure where to put your effort. Your inbound customers give you a really good place to start. That doesn't mean that's where we end up. That doesn't mean in outbound that's sort of what the end goal is, to just target those individuals. But it gives us a really solid place to start. And interviewing someone, asking someone very critical questions around what they're looking for, especially pain points, gives us a really good launching point to be able to say, these are our differentiators. This is what we do to help. And then we're able to structure outbound with some framework in mind of what might work. Outbound is always sort of just testing to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and what might work in one season doesn't work in another. But if you have a good set of interviews for us to review and work off of, we're able to at least have a solid framework and starting point of what we know is like a critical environment to work from.
Absolutely. Yeah. So these customer interviews are super important. They're a super important kind of foundational building block for where you're kind of going to go to figure this out. And something that actually a colleague of ours, Sebastian, mentioned to me when we were kind of planning this live stream is that it would be really interesting and kind of good knowledge for you to have, not to just interview your best customers, but to make sure you interview your worst ones. So you figure out, why are they unhappy? What went wrong? And then can I kind of group them together? Can I see any common denominator between these worst clients that, if whether it's industry, title, I don't know what it might be, but if you can kind of seek out a pattern there, you might be able to identify who you shouldn't be targeting, as well as, of course, figuring out from those great clients why they came to you and what problem you did solve really well.
100%. That's a great point. And even for our efforts too with clients, we make sure we're tracking all of those quote unquote negative responses, or I'm not the right person, or, not the right time. We make an effort to internally track all of that for our clients, because there is value in knowing what doesn't work, who isn't interested, who has no business falling into your list. Like, that is vitally important. It's just as important as knowing what is working. And it helps us not spend time in places that we have no business spending time in.
Absolutely. And that's a huge thing. You don't want to be spinning your tires with outbound. You just want to focus on what's good. Uh, the next kind of thing, and this kind of is in the same vein here as the customer interviews, but it's around case studies. So if you have a great client, you did that interview, they were fantastic, they loved what you did, and they want to be a case study, they're like the perfect use case, you've got this case study, you now also have social proof, which will make it easier to target within that similar demographic or ICP, or however you want to look at it. Talk to me about, Patricia, about the case studies that you guys leverage on our execution side for our clients.
100%. I mean, a case study, no matter what, is valuable. It gives someone a point of reference as to what you've done for other people, proof that, yeah, there's clout behind your name, especially if you're working in a heavily saturated environment or industry where there are a lot of people doing similar things to what you're doing. It's vitally important that you have a case study that shows how you differentiate and the value you're able to add, because prospecting happens across multiple environments. You want something that, an easy click for someone to go look at something. Sending websites are, of course, a great thing to do. However, if you have a website that might be more technical or tech focused, where people kind of have to dig and spend time looking for the information they might want, you're going to have drop off there. Especially, outbound, you want a 10-second, someone can just go find what they need to find. Visual aids, especially stats, ways that you're able to tangibly represent what you do in a case study for someone to look at. It's usually important because we're in like a quick click environment, right? Where no one's going to sit and read, a 20-page dossier of whatever it might be. I'm notorious for that myself. Like, you're skimming through social media and you're like, oh, there's my 150 characters. So if you have a well-designed case study, it gives someone something really tangible and interesting to review, and they'll remember that, especially a visual, someone will remember that down the line. And it's also something they can send out internally as well. Someone's not going to make an effort probably to copy and paste your message that you sent them, but they might send the link of the case study to someone internally that it would be of value to. So there's a natural referral there as well. So case studies are really malleable and interesting and vitally important to have when it comes to outbound.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we're kind of backtracking a little bit to when you're first even thinking about your ideal customer, say you don't even have any clients yet, and you're trying to figure out who you should be targeting, or who you should even be kind of having marketing do their targeting towards as people you want to bring in, you need to think first and foremost about the problem that you solve. and this is gonna help you through the rest of your kind of outbound careers and figuring out that ICP and all your outreach. It's got to come back down first and foremost to that problem that you solve, because you have to be a solution to your clients rather than just pitching another product or whatever. So finding a way to come back, and Patricia mentioned it in the first kind of topic we were talking on there about customer interviews. You want to figure out why they came to you, what problem of theirs did you solve, and then find a way to distill this problem that you solve, write it down in a really concise value proposition. That is going to be this kind of key piece for who is best for kind of your product or your service based on the problem that you solve for whom. Yeah, and that's something that you guys definitely focus on the account strategy side. Is there a kind of a way that you dig that out of clients? How do you kind of get to that key problem that they solve?
That nugget. So we do something we call a niche workshop. We use the mirror board as an example. I have sort of like a basic framework set up. If we want to take a look at it now, it's a good time. So I'll share my screen. Granted, the universe of the internet will let me do this effectively. Internet's not always easiest. Can you see this mirror board?
Yes.
Nice. So what we do with all of our clients is we run them through a niche workshop, and we break things down under the framework of jobs to be done. It's important to remember that one of your key differentiators is not just like, oh, this is something great we do. Everyone, in the nicest, polite way possible, everyone thinks their product is the best out there. You have to. You need to stand firm and confident behind what you do. But you have to understand that everyone feels that way, and just selling something at the end of the day is not going to resonate the most with your prospects, especially in outbound. To detour a little bit, inbound, people are coming to you going, I need help. I already know what the problem is. They might even come with their credit card in hand. And with outbound, it's not the same approach, because people might not even know what their problem is at the moment, or even where to go to solve that issue. So we use a jobs to be done framework. And what that means is we start pretty high level and work our way down with the focus around, if you have this prospect, what are they doing on a daily basis? What are they bumping up against? What are their pain points? What's really grinding their gears? And then how can you structure messaging in a way that is respectful of that, in tune with that? And if people hear, oh, someone gets what I'm going through, they're more inclined to want to engage 100%. So what we do is we usually we'll break this down. There might be several iterations of this on a board, but we'll start with, hey, for your inbound efforts, as an example, what industry is really coming to you, or what industry do you really want to focus on that you think you can have the most impact? So we'll start pretty high level industry, as an example, supply chain. And what's the revenue? You kind of want to work backwards from the cost of your solution. And then you work backwards based on, what would their company need to generate revenue-wise to justify purchasing your solution? Especially if your solution is coming in to replace something else. That adds its own set of potential issues, because you have to justify someone wanting to overhaul their current system. If you're walking into an environment where they don't have any solutions in place, it's so easy to show your differentiators because they don't necessarily have something to compare it with. So something to keep in mind there. So the revenue of are you looking to target between, is it an SMB, a small, medium-sized business? Are you going for enterprise deals? You want to ensure that you're clear about what is the minimum and or maximum revenue that your industry is operating in order to justify prospecting. Otherwise, you're going to get a bunch of people saying just not for us, we don't have the budget. And then sometimes it is important to look at employee count. As an example, if you're working, say, with field sales representatives, you kind of want to know ahead of time how many people would be utilizing the solution you have, again, to justify the cost. And that should reflect the employee size of the company. Also something to consider, do you do, say, e-commerce, but also keep in mind that they have brick and mortar stores. Your employee count goes up because it has to reflect boots on the ground as well. So having a general knowledge of the approximate company employee size of a company that you want to work in can help you pare down as well, and take a look at, when you're building your list, being able to skim out the outliers that just would never fit. Any questions? Perhaps I should pause there around, if there's anything that people want to know, or Sarah, you want to jump in with some stuff on your side as well?
Yeah, I think this mirror board, the visualization of this is super important, because of course it's showing you how you're kind of breaking down step by step from this title to the kind of overarching goals they have in that role, all the way through to these kind of day by day issues that they want to tackle. And of course, the problem that we solve, if we know that this title has that problem, we can figure out exactly how to target them, what the messaging is, all of that from this strategy. Maybe we pose it to any of the people on the stream right now. If anybody has any questions about their own ICP, and kind of the jobs to be done theory for their particular industry, and then titles and so on and so forth, we can have Patricia take you through a little niche workshop here and help you really nail it.
For sure. Happy to keep chatting as we go. And if there's questions, feel free to just jump in my rambling here, nudge me. So once you kind of have an idea of your industry, I'll keep my chat box away here. So Sarah, feel free to jump in so I'm not distracted by my chat.
Sure.
Then we want to take a look at our titles. And this is something where my approach is to group them based on the department that they're in. So say your solution touches, we'll use supply chain again as another example. It might touch, your supply chain folks, your ops folks, your logistics folks, your networking folks. So you want to keep in mind that their pain points are going to be different based on their job title. So try and structure people that would have similar interactions with each other, maybe work on the same team. They're able to poke the guy behind them and say, hey, I just got this email about such and such, not someone on the other side of the building. So keep in mind, you want to try and maintain structure that way. So next you're going to look at your titles, and we'll use supply chain again as an example. You might have your, chief supply chain officer, the VP of supply chain, director of supply chain. And then there's a number of various titles that fall under that umbrella that would deal with supply chain. Keep it pretty generic, high level to start. And then what you want to do is recognize what those titles are, map them out. And from there, you work in a downward stream. Sometimes we work laterally, depending on how the client's brain might operate with the information. But you want to next look at your high level goals. So what is this person at the end of the day, the main goal of their job and their title? So, a chief supply chain officer might be managing budgets. They might be overseeing any new development in an industry. They might be a thought leader. They would probably have pretty high level goals. And if it comes to implementing a new solution, they might not be the initial point of contact you're going to get through quickly. Keep in mind that the higher the title, usually the more gatekeepers you have if you're on the phone, or the more they are prospected, the less likely they are to necessarily see an email the first time. So keep in mind, you kind of want to go for the person like maybe a director of supply chain or a director of supply chain ops or supply chain innovation. That person might be more inclined to reply. Often a chief title, a C-suite title, will defer down to someone to go do investigatory work for them and then bring them a couple options back. So outbound is all about manipulating and working with all of those different titles and like how to best optimize each title. So once you figure out, a handful of titles you think are great to target, then you look at their goals. Director of supply chain might be managing a larger team underneath them. They might be managing day-to-day operations. They might be managing influx of workflow, delegating projects, ensuring that the day-to-day business operation side of things are flowing naturally. You have sort of a high-level goal of what they're doing: operations, budget, growing revenue, innovating, those kind of broad terms. And then what you want to do next is our purple ones are our jobs to be done. So these are very critical, important tabs. So what you want to do here is say, okay, so on a daily basis, what is this person doing? Let's take a director. Usually they're managing a project. They're managing humans. They're delegating their own tasks and jobs and ensuring that everything is running smoothly, managing workflow, project management. Those are sort of common terms, at least if we're working, say, in like a supply chain framework. Perhaps if you're working in sales, they're managing a team of sales associates and or business development reps. They're ensuring that we're meeting KPIs. They're looking at monthly goals, tracking all of this stuff. So in those jobs to be done, you really want to break down individual specific pieces of their job, because they're going to go, oh yeah, I'm sitting here doing that. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm like looking ahead of my month and planning out whatever it might be. And once you have a good idea of what that looks like, then you dive headfirst into your pain points. So look at that job to be done. Say they're managing people. Maybe the pain point, which would be our pretty pink ones. Maybe they're saying, hey, like, I just don't have enough internal resources to do what I need to do. or I don't have the tech that I need to support what we want to do. Marketing is a great example where, oftentimes marketing teams are strapped for resources and they're required to produce a lot of content. Maybe your solution helps with content production or content creation. So you're going, hey, a major pain point is like they have these massive goals to meet. They don't have the team, the resources, the tech, or the expertise to do what they need to do. We need to recognize that and say, hey, as an example, I recognize that internal resources may be limited for you right now, especially I'd be remiss not to mention with, budget cuts globally because of the pandemic we're in. I recognize this is an issue. We want to help in this kind of way. So we spend a lot of time in our niche workshops discussing pain points and jobs to be done, because that is the cincher. That is the thing that says, I hear you, I see you, I understand what you're going through. I recognize what you're dealing with on a daily basis. And someone goes, oh, okay, thank God. They're not just like pitching me something that is, because they think their solution's wonderful. They're hearing that I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z. And of course, you don't want to necessarily come from a negative place with someone. You're just recognizing that every job has its own taxing, problematic areas. And you're trying to speak to that because that is a key differentiator. So I'll pause there before we move forward.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, we have a couple people that said some things here. So we'll have a look. So Kenny says, this is great. We know who our ICP is, selling into highly competitive market, cybersecurity. Right now, I'm targeting security engineers that are new to their role, less than 3 months. Yeah, that's a very, very targeted persona, obviously, to be reaching out to. You've really narrowed your list there. And hopefully you're using something like the jobs to be done theory to figure out, now that you know exactly who you're targeting, how exactly to reach out to them, what kind of messaging to use. And then from EW, jumping ahead a little bit, ICP developed to target accounts plus contacts ID'd, to marketing air cover conducted, to contacts engaging with marketing to a degree, but do not select schedule a demo. Okay, so CRM score, MQL, but not sales ready yet. Now what? Okay, so how do you take somebody who has engaged with marketing material and turn them into an outbound prospect? We're actually going to touch on that in a little bit. We have a segment that is specifically about that. We call that, it's actually a Beck Holland, it's sort of a version of a Beck Holland word, but we call that midbound. It's not true cold outbound, but they didn't come in through inbound. So yes, we will touch on that. We'll come back to that. And okay, the other point that I wanted to touch on, just piggybacking off of what Patricia has been saying here, is about with the targets. Oftentimes, I think people get caught in the trap of prospecting the end user rather than the decision maker. So you always have to understand who has budget and who has authority to actually make the purchase of your product, of your service. And they are not necessarily the person that's going to be using that tool or service or product or whatever it is. That's a case where I find an account-based strategy can be really useful, because sometimes you do want to engage that end user in the conversation because they're the ones that understand all the kind of problems that they're having. But then, of course, you need to engage those higher ups who are actually going to pull the trigger on an engagement with you guys. So that was just a little something that I wanted to add in there when we're looking at these titles and who to target and what their pains are. If we're selling some kind of sales enablement tool and an outbound SDR is going to be the one to use it, outbound SDR is not going to be the one to prospect, because of course they can't actually make that final decision. So 100%. That was just a little caveat that I wanted to add to that there.
Totally. And to use that security example, someone who's new to their role is not most likely going to be a decision maker right out of the gate. It might be a situation where maybe they're a mover shaker that wants to prove their, entrance into this new position. However, if they are on the tier, the hierarchy, if you will, to use that term loosely, if there's someone who wouldn't by nature be a decision maker, you can definitely prospect them, but it may be more of a, hey, like, I recognize this is what your new role is, you're dealing with, is there someone I can connect with to support your goals or support the work that you and your team are doing? Because that then refers you up to the decision maker or to someone who can at least take the ball and run with it. Because you can prospect all day the people that are dealing with the problem, but if they're unable to fix the problem, they might not be the best person to be prospecting or putting the majority of your efforts into. Referral-based campaigns, always a great idea. You never know what, when you cast that net out, you never know what you're going to get back in the best possible way. But you do want to keep in mind that the more you circle around the ideal person who's going to be a decision maker, the longer it's going to take for you to get there. So you might not be hitting those goals of how many meetings you want to book, or you might be booking meetings that aren't going anywhere, or booking meetings that you now have to subsequently have multiple meetings to follow. Like that just enters into the sales funnel a different way. It's important to recognize, like, start with the low hanging fruit. The people that if you get them on a call, they're going to be really interested in understanding your solution. They might punch that back up or kick that back down, but someone who really has a solid grasp as to what they need to do to solve the problem and or implement a new solution. So keeping that in mind, when you're looking at your titles, you can spend some time working in titles that might not be decision makers. But to Sarah, your point, it's really important to know, like, who's signing the dotted line, who's driving the efforts, who's influential. They all need to be prospected a little bit differently. And so once we reach our pain points, depending on the type of solution you have, if it's really multifaceted, if it's really dynamic, I would spend more time at the bottom here. I drop some more post-it notes down and say, tell me about your solution. How does it address each pain point? And we'd walk through that. Because then when we take this away to build messaging, we'll work backwards in the way we structure the messaging to say, like, this is our solution, this is our pain point, this is the job to be done. We want that all to be reflected in our messaging. If you have sort of a pretty, I don't want to use the word simple, but like focused solution, it's really clear what you do, it's only around a specific area, you might not need to spend a ton of time at the bottom of the board here looking at solutions, because it's pretty clear, the solution is what it is. So it's, up to your team, to decide how important that is. But if you're doing this internally, it's great to get a bunch of people from your team who deal with the customer in different capacities to do this board together. Obviously, I'm doing it with a client, and I'll ask them to bring people with them who would have, say, like your VP of product would have a different point of view than your sales team, simply because they touch your product differently or your solution or service differently. So having a couple voices in on this is really important as well. Because you're going to see things that you might not necessarily, if you have someone out in the field who's like boots on the ground, they're talking to your customer every single day. I worked in industrial supplies for a little bit, and I literally was going to shipyards and talking with these people that were physically building ships all day. And the information you glean from that is spectacular. And you're able to come back in and say to your sales team, listen, I'm not sure if you recognize this is something they're dealing with, but this is what they're dealing with. So if you're bringing this format internally, or you're talking to clients about this format, make sure you have multiple voices as well to look at it, because you'll gather a bunch of information that you wouldn't necessarily know otherwise.
Yeah, very true. Very good points. So all of this that we've kind of been talking about so far is around nailing that niche, so that ideal customer profile. And I just want to touch on our kind of next section here, which is inbound versus outbound. So the idea that the people who come in through inbound are not necessarily who you should be targeting through outbound. The way you can kind of look at it is that anyone who comes in through inbound represents your total addressable market. So this is anybody that you could potentially work with. Yeah, you could offer them a solution, a product, and they could use it, versus that ideal customer profile who is your best use case. You solve a specific problem for them. The cost versus yield is there, so they'll pay the most for it. Because they value it the most, and it'll then justify that outbound outreach and kind of the costs and lengthy sales cycles that go into that. And yeah, do you have any other ideas on kind of TAM versus ICP, Patricia?
For sure, yeah. So you want to keep in mind that your total addressable market means you're going to be prospecting and targeting differently based on what component of that market you're in. To your point, Sarah, like, low-hanging fruit is always the best way to start, and you're going to get a bunch of information from those people, especially if you're booking meetings. Simply, just because someone isn't ready to sign the dotted line and hand over their credit card to you doesn't mean there isn't a ton of value in those Are We a Fit calls and discovery calls you're going to do once you get the prospect on the phone. It also doesn't mean there's a ton of opportunity to nurture them. If you're looking at your total market, absolutely there's going to be outliers or people that in theory, can use your solution. But you also want to be cognizant of the fact that, like, what market are you stepping into? Are you stepping into a market that's actively buying? Are you stepping into a market that's currently doing a lot of info gathering? And you're going to find this out pretty quickly. And of course, like, COVID is an example of how it really shook the market up in a ton of environments. All of a sudden, something that wouldn't necessarily be a need to have, now your total addressable market is massive because everyone needs this and they wouldn't necessarily have needed it before. So being mindful of like where that market exists, what are they currently dealing with, time of year, seasons, your total addressable market changes as well, and your focus needs to change. So it's a pretty broad like topic of conversation, but I think you nailed exactly what that means is like start with your low hanging fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, that's kind of where we differentiate finally in this inbound versus outbound bit. We're not finished. The this is where we kind of differentiate between a lead and a prospect. So a lead being somebody that comes in through inbound, so they're a lead, they're a meeting, they're a potential opportunity. But a prospect is somebody that is in that ideal customer profile. So they're that great fit. They're somebody that you want to spend that time and energy going out after, because you've done all this homework. You know exactly what you need to do and how you need to target them, and then that's what makes it worthwhile, and that's what makes them a good prospect.
Totally. And don't be alarmed either when you're doing discovery calls with a prospect versus a lead, that they might get on the call and be like, why am I here? But people get asked that all the time,
Oh
like,
yeah.
why am I here? And it's up to you to be like, great question. Like, tell me about what you do on a regular basis. Like, there is that extra little bit of be inquisitive, be curious. And they might not necessarily be ready to make a step into a lead at that point. That doesn't mean that doesn't happen, or they're not going to take that information away.
Yeah, very true. We have a comment here from Julia saying our solution is money, private capital loans. I imagine that the reason that Julia, you're commenting that is because you want to see how we would say that you should kind of nail this ideal customer profile. I think probably as with any outbound, anybody who is wanting to do outbound, you do need to kind of nail that niche. So how can you refine this? Because private capital loans, that could be literally anybody, right? You could be doing these kind of those loans that you can like walk off the street and get it at 500, whatever they call it, payday loans, or you could be doing, anything else. So you've got to nail who it is exactly that you want to be targeting. Maybe if you have experimented with all these different potential clients, who were the best ones? Where was the most return on investment when it came to working with them? That kind of thing. So kind of narrow that down so that you can at least bring in that total addressable market to some semblance of an ICP. And then you can go in and do, like Patricia was showing us, that kind of nail a niche where it's like all of these potentials within that now smaller addressable market. Oh, here's more context. Loans are stock loans. So we're dealing with execs at large publicly traded companies globally mostly. Perfect time to use the jobs to be done theory.
Yeah.
A bunch of our clients target like C-suite executive people titles at like billion-dollar companies, so on and so forth. Absolutely, as Patricia said, they'll be the most guarded by gatekeepers, probably the most heavily prospected. So it is even more important that you reach out to them with that relevance and showing that you know exactly what their pain is and how you can solve it.
Mm-hmm. And it might be a case too of like, do you need to fish around them a little bit and experiment a bit with that and recognize like where are they in the market as well? Is it a time in the market where like they're in critical need of capital, like they're in critical need of these loans? You can discuss that. If it's not, then it might simply be opening a conversation, and your nurture cycle might just be a little bit longer to understand them. Gatekeepers are a big deal, but there's ways around that, whether it's prospecting via LinkedIn, whether it's do they have a heavy LinkedIn environment, like sort of presence. And we'll get into, I'm sure, more of that down the road, but like in this chat. But it's understanding like don't get too granular with the C-suite because they might not even understand that that's something going on. If revenue is a big thing, or like you want to keep it pretty high level with them at first, because if you get too granular, they're not necessarily going to have a clear indication of what that might look for their team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great segue because, yeah, we are going to get into some of this application here in this next section of the live stream. The first thing that I want to touch on before we actually will go in and chat about channels. So as Patricia mentioned, where they're kind of active, the first thing that we want to chat about is referral method. So that's something that obviously predictable revenue kind of preaches as a great method. We've talked about it being up, down, up. Patricia, tell me how you kind of use the referral method when you're prospecting for our clients.
Totally. One thing we definitely do, or at least I try to do for my clients, is then if I know I'm definitely getting this person on the hook in the sense that, like, say, as an example, to chat about LinkedIn again, where you know you're hitting probably their cell phone pretty immediately. Chances are the conversation might happen a little bit quickly. But in sort of a more traditional framework, say you're doing email and cold calling and whatnot, I always like to give someone the opportunity to send me elsewhere. That's not meaning I'm trying to pass the buck onto somebody else. It simply means like being cognizant of the fact that you're being prospected right now. You just might not be the right person on your team. Just because you have this title doesn't mean someone else on the line of titles is actually the best person to reach out to. So offering someone an opportunity to by saying something along the lines of, which I'm sure you see in emails all the time, like, are you the best person to reach out to about this? Is there a colleague on your team who would be better to touch base with about, say, X, Y, and Z solution? Does someone on your team manage X, Y, and Z? Is there someone on your team dedicated to developing or planning for implementing X, Y, and Z? So that if they do reach that point in your email, which hopefully by, the second, third, fourth follow-up email they do, they're saying, oh yeah, okay, no, well, it's not me, but this person, sitting across from me or wherever it might be, is the best person to reach out to. Keeping in mind with C-suite, yeah, chances are, unless it is a smaller company, they're going to be sending that work elsewhere. So this is where client interviews are really important. The C-suite individual may be the final decision maker, but are they the first foot in the door? Maybe not. So if you're interviewing your current client base and you go, oh, our first entrance point into this company was this title, maybe we spend some time there. So that's a good, and then they can refer you outwards, right? Or to bring more individuals into the conversation. And if you're sort of doing a wider look at things, a broader net for referrals, even something simple as like, hey, I'm reaching out about X, Y, and Z, like HR solution, just simply, are you the best person to talk to about this? Understanding also different titles want to be prospected differently. Depending on how conversational, traditionally speaking, that title that you're prospecting is, you may or may not get more referrals based on that. Engineers are notoriously quite quiet in conversation on when we're prospecting them. We might not necessarily get the conversational approach with them simply because that's not typically how their title engages in the workforce in their current climate. So if you are, say, targeting a marketing individual or HR, like part of their job is huge amounts of communication. So they might be, if you know that at some point they're involved in the decision making, maybe that's a good place to start for referrals because you're more likely to get them conversing with you. And they might eventually land you with the person that you need to talk to that may not necessarily have a conversational role by nature. So being cognizant of like the personality you're asking for the referral from as well.
Awesome. So that's kind of one of the strategies that you can use in this outreach and this application. Once you kind of know who you're supposed to be targeting, let's touch on channels. So obviously, the kind of three main channels for outbound being LinkedIn, cold calling, email. When do you use each of those channels? How do you decide?
Tons and tons of factors there. Doing these niche workshops is very beneficial as well. Also, testing. You might not get the channel right the first time. That is okay. Do not worry about that. Just because someone isn't responsive now doesn't mean you don't recycle that list later in a different format. A couple of factors here, industry specific. Some industries are heavily present on certain channels. LinkedIn is a great example. I have a dog coming in under my desk. There's 4 in the house right now. We have a busy
Wow.
dog house. Hi. So being cognizant of the industry that you're in, is this an industry that is big in thought leadership? And then LinkedIn's probably a great approach. Do you want to do multi-channel? Right now with COVID, a lot of people are working remotely. So phone is not necessarily the best way to get a hold of someone. They may not have their cell phone linked up with their direct line at the office. The gatekeeper may not know where to send you because they don't have a line for them at home. Being cognizant of what that looks like for a multi-channel approach. Maybe typically email is performing really well for you. So you want to put that focus on email. Say you start an email and cold calling campaign and you're just noticing you're not getting the response rates you're looking for. Maybe you start then adding LinkedIn touch points where you can say, hey, I shot you a couple of emails. I recognize your inbox is probably really saturated. Thought I'd reach out to you here and see if, we can start up a conversation. So testing is a really big deal. There's a couple industries that, when we get a client come in and we go, oh, you know what, I've had a lot of success with this particular channel before. Let's just start you there and see what happens. Might surprise you. That you might have phenomenal results right out of the gate, or you might go, okay, well, maybe we need to start with a LinkedIn invitation or start with, an email and see where we land, especially for referral side of things. LinkedIn may not be the best place to start a referral campaign because someone's going to say, it's 6 p.m. on a Monday. Why are you asking me where the so-and-so is, you have to be cognizant of how you're targeting, what time of day you're targeting for referrals. So those channels are multifaceted, dynamic. You can interchange any number of those things. Don't hammer the phone if you're not getting anywhere. Say you're making tons and tons and tons of cold calling and you're seeing more people replying on email, tell your SDR to axe the cold calling. So just be flexible and always testing, constantly testing. I think we did a workshop about testing recently, and it's really valuable to track all of your results when you're doing these types of channels, especially industry specific.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to bring up one of our guest comments again here. This is Julia continuing on the private capital loans thread here. So she mentioned that referral partners who are connected to our borrowers are the best source, but slow to build. That is absolutely the case for so many companies that for a long time it is this referral based that is bringing in these new clients. And you're right, it is slow to build. It's unpredictable. You can't scale it. You don't have a whole lot of control over that channel. So the recommendation would be to look for a way to actually reach out to people cold. Is there anybody that you can identify as this good fit based on who has come to you through these referral partners? What are the types of companies that have been needing your capital, as Patricia said, and then looking at kind of the market and what that looks like, kind of pulling all this together. Can you map out a bit of who that ideal customer might be, and then figure out a way to reach out to them cold and say, hey, based on your referral partner's experience, we've worked with clients like you guys in XYZ way. Are you having this particular pain? You can use a referral method within the company. You can reach out actually straight to that whoever that decision maker is in the end. But sounds to me like it would be worth experimenting with some real targeted outbound rather than trying to build up that referral base, because it is a slow build.
Having a number of name drops you can use as well. Reaching out to past clients and saying, can I drop your name here? That builds clout as well. And they might know someone who works in that business who's able to use you then as a referral. So this is a great example of what you were talking about earlier, Sarah, like case studies, name drops, having a bulk of work behind you in a portfolio. Probably, there's some conflict of interest or potentially confidentiality issues, especially around loans and whatnot. But if you do have names you can drop, that is incredibly helpful with referrals, because then people say, oh, I recognize that you've worked with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But you're right. True. Targeted is good.
Yeah. And then Michael Haynes says, my solution is client acquisition and growth strategies for B2B professional services, IT, SMBs. So I imagine, again, we're talking about how do we kind of nail this ideal customer profile. Obviously, you know the types of companies that you can help. Great start. B2B professional services and IT, small, medium businesses. Why don't we do a kind of like broad nail a niche on that, Patricia?
Totally. We can drop in the mirror board. The only thing is that I'm not entirely confident. Confident is part of it. Yeah. Okay. So definitely confidentiality would be a thing. And so you would absolutely have to recognize whether you can drop a name there or not.
For sure.
So for this broad sort of look at B2B professional services, IT, if you're listening, Michael Haynes, and able to drop in a couple specifics, I could probably build you out a mirror board. However, with that, we could probably just have a conversation around it instead of me trying to put together some titles that I might not know exactly what you're looking for. So client acquisition, the first thing that comes to mind is like, are you working with consultants? Consultants, especially via LinkedIn, are a phenomenal way to gather information and have access to other people's portfolios. It's one person who might have access to 5 prospects. So when I hear client acquisition, that does come to mind is like, do you have a network of consultants you're working for that you can trade services? Michael says, sure, nice. Okay. So let's dig a little bit deeper then. Is Michael, as we're chatting, are you able to let me know sort of like an industry that you're having success in? So business to business, professional service, IT, is there a particular industry that you work most heavily in? And sort of SMB, well, we're probably looking between, probably 10 million to sort of 50 million, I would say, in revenue. That's probably where my brain would start with, unless you have any specifics that you want to share. What I can do then is open the board back up. And this shouldn't be too detailed. We've got time. So if you could give me a little bit of a hint around the industry that you're seeing the most success with currently, we could probably start there. I'll just open my chat feature here. Revenue is SMB. So I would say let's maybe just start with sort of the 10 mil to 50 mil sort of area. Pardon any spelling errors. This doesn't spell check me right at the gate, and I'm not going to spend too much of my time ensuring that it's perfect. But SMB also, are you looking at an employee count of potentially, 15 to 40 employees? Is it 15 to 100 employees? Success with niche consulting firms, often with 110 to perfect. Nice. Michael on the ball. Love it. So then the revenue might vary a bit there based on the size of the company that you're looking for. So industry, we're looking at consulting firms. So what's nice about consulting firms is they are a natural referral system for you, a really organic referral system. So that's fantastic because a lot of those people are go-getters and they're inclined to want to help and connect. I would definitely suggest starting on LinkedIn here for you. LinkedIn is a great way to connect with movers and shakers and sort of thought leaders as well. So to go back up to this, so client acquisition, growth strategies, B2B professional IT services. Just to be very frank, IT professional services is a pretty saturated market at the moment. So you really, really, really want to spend a lot of time understanding what are your differentiators here. That's going to be a big deal for you. So keeping in mind that your pain points are probably something that you want to spend a great deal of time as well in, because differentiators are key in a highly saturated market. SMBs, luckily, you probably have access to people you wouldn't necessarily have access to in an enterprise. So is this something that you're looking for account managers? Are you looking for directors of sort of what? Give me an idea then of the title that you're seeing success in. Normally, my thought would be that because it's an SMB, you might even have access to C-suite. So I'm just going to drop them in as sort of a generic. And then you want to probably focus on a VP of, I'm not sure sort of what department you're spending a ton of time in here, and your director level titles. In the smaller SMB, you might not necessarily see a VP title. It might just be a bunch of directors or even managers. Sometimes in your smaller sized companies, you can go directly to the manager and they are a decision maker based on the size of your company. So you might be axing out one tier altogether. I just am not entirely confident I can answer that right here, right now. And so the goal of this consulting firm, Sarah, maybe as you're reading through this, do you have any thoughts then what would be a high level goal for a B2B? Oh, we've got more info. So often I work with CEOs focused on growth, small marketing teams, limited expertise in B2B strategy, product development. Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay. So you're targeting CEOs. That's good to know. So just in the interest of saving time, we'll use our title here. Focused on growth, and they have a small marketing team, limited expertise. Okay. So their goals then, I'm guessing, are, so we're saying B2B strategy, product development. I want to ensure I'm reading this correctly. Give me 1 second. Small marketing teams. Nice. So basically, are you offering then something that is sort of an end-to-end service? Is this something like a boutique level service where you're jumping in to ensure that you're offering a well-rounded sort of bank of resources, or like a bench of expertise, or a bench of experts? So what I might do then is jump down to jobs to be done. So is this something where you're developing and creating content? I'm guessing if it's marketing, are you creating content for individuals? Are you offering support? So I'm just going to, in theory, drop this in, and Michael, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So this is something that, keep in mind, this is the team that you're working with. So the C-suite, the individual, the CEO might be overseeing a group of individuals. So part of his job, we'll skip the goal section for now. Part of the job of him might be managing, a team. It might be allocating resources. It might be something along the lines of meeting deadlines. You have budget concerns, especially for the C-suite. So these are all things that would be important. Advanced cloud native organizations with highly skilled paid security practitioners benefit from our solution, as most solutions are not cloud native. Nice. Okay. So one of the things you do focus on is cloud services. So that's a key differentiator. So what I might do then, and this is sort of,
I think those are actually two different people. So we've got Michael Haynes and then Kenny.
Oh, Kenny, sorry.
So Michael did say in terms of what he's doing, it's helping with strategy development and execution support.
Nice. Sorry about that. Perfect. Good catch. Okay, so if you're doing strategy development and execution support, my guess is that the C level, say it's a CMO, CEO, what they want to do is they're trying to acquire and grow. So we probably in our goals would be like, we would say revenue growth. And obviously we want to optimize accounts. So we want like account growth as well. And so strategy development, execution, and support. So is that what you're doing? I'm so sorry if I'm being a bit confusing here. So are you offering support? Is this your client or is this what you're doing? Are you offering strategy support and execution support? Or is this what the client is doing that you are now offering consulting for? Two sort of different approaches here. Michael, I wish we had a line for you to call.
Yeah.
It'd be helpful. CEOs focused on growth, small marketing teams. My guess is you're jumping in here as the expert to support the marketing team.
I think so.
Okay. So then when you're looking at the people that you're supporting, I'm just going to get this out of the way. You want to look at the jobs that this person is doing. So they're probably managing a budget, meeting deadlines, allocating resources, team management. Their team are probably creating content. Their team are obviously working to support. Michael Haynes says, what I do to them. Yes, I offer strategy execution support to CEOs of those SMBs. Nice. Okay. So what you're looking at then is you're supporting their team. So a pain point for them is they're going to have limited resources internally. That's where your expertise jumps in. So immediately you can jump here to say like you have either it's you or your team would be a bench of experts. And you're able to, I'm assuming here, support an internal team on their end. So you're acting as a support for them. And so if it's creating content, strategy and execution support to their CEOs. So what does that look like for the CEO then? Are you, a pain point for them perhaps is, are they not able to scale their content? Like, do they need you to help scale for them? A pain point might be budget restrictions. So is your service end to end, do they have a team that is maxed out or they don't have the expertise that they need? So limited expertise. Those are all pain points that you would experience in a situation where you're acting as a consultant or acting as a full team sometimes. Is this a situation where you can plug and play? Like, are you able to then go in, offer them consulting and support and offer them the skill set? Like, are you offering a set of skills that they can now take away and internally grow off of? And are they able to then walk away from, say, a contract with you and develop their own team? So are you offering consulting as part of that as well? So that's something you can offer as a solution. So high level goals, account growth, they want to grow revenue. The C-suite individual might not have the support team as well that they need to execute on. So maybe they're missing that tier. Are they missing? Nice. Okay, perfect. I'm on the right track here. Are they missing the tier of like, they don't have a support system with like, they don't have a VP, they don't have a director level. So they're non-existent. These individuals that would normally execute the day-to-day management, are you stepping in and managing their team? Are you managing their workflow? Are you offering solutions around how to optimize the resources they currently have in place? So you're able to then remove the individual, the CEO from a lot of that decision making and alleviate his time. So maybe part of your solution is giving back time to the CEO. Maybe he has limited, or she for that matter, have limited time on their end to execute new ideas. So maybe they have a team that doesn't necessarily have the creative capacity to do what you do. So recognizing the pain point of this individual is probably heavily overworked. They're probably also wearing too many hats. If they are an SMB, they probably are missing one of the tiers to delegate down to. So then you want to look at that pain point and say, are you trying to wear too many hats? Are you trying to enact solutions that you just don't have the resources to do? Recognizing limited resources, but not demeaning the fact that this person probably has a very capable team. They just are strapped for support. So are you acting then as someone who comes in and alleviates the workload from the CEO who probably needs to focus his energies elsewhere? So as you're looking at the high level goals of this person that you're working with, they want to focus their time on acquiring and revenue growth, most likely revenue generating. That's what a CEO has a lot of focus on. Are they a thought leader also in their industry? Do they want to spend some time working in thought leadership and not in the weeds with their team? That's another thing too. If you're too heavily involved in the day-to-day nitty-gritty management, are you stepping in, offering support there, which alleviates the CEO, she or he, to go enact their own job effectively? So jobs to be done, I would definitely say that you're probably, with consulting, looking at implementing new frameworks, implementing new solutions. This person doesn't have the time to do that. So their pain points are literally limited resources. My question then to you, if I had you on the line, would be like, in your consulting, do you specialize in something? Do you have solutions or maybe software that you implement for them that they wouldn't necessarily have on their own, in their own, bank of resources? What makes you different than any other consulting firm? Do you have a history working in an environment? Do you have stats that I could drop in here on the bottom around like, oh, we can limit costs by this amount, this percentage. I can grow revenue by this percentage. I can, act as a boutique service, an end-to-end service. Those kind of words as well, like end-to-end, are something that really resonate with people. Boutique can kind of suggest expense. So is expense an issue for this person? Are they concerned that they don't have enough money to pay for a service? How do you work with that? Do you bring other members of your team in here? So understanding, this is a little bit generic. Like we spend an hour and a half doing this with a client to be able, and I'd have you live to be able to confirm that I'm on the right track here. But you definitely want to think about this CEO. High level goal, they are probably acting in the weeds with their team in a capacity they don't really necessarily have time for, and or they need support in speciality. So the jobs to be done around this, yes, have a specific framework that used to help drive revenue growth and product development. Perfect. So I won't ask for the details simply because that is, probably something that may not necessarily want to share right out of the gate with all over the internet. But if I had you with me now, on our Zoom call, I would ask you for clear ideas of what that differentiator is. We could even work up there. So say your specific differentiator is you have a bench of, X number of expert people who are experts in content creation. I'll just use that as an example. Then we could work up also from that, which is like, okay, so this SMB then, if they need help with content creation, are they working in a space like Facebook? Are they working in Instagram? Are they working via email? They're working on other social platforms. So do you optimize test results? Do you optimize revenue growth? Do you optimize content creation? Like having a clear expertise and focus. I might pause there. Sarah, I'm not sure if you want to jump in. Again, pretty generic. We would want to be spending a ton of time doing this, but you kind of get an idea of what the triangle looks like.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe you could pop a little Post-it in the same color on each row of what the name of this row is. And then we can leave it up as we kind of continue on with the live stream. And that way, if people want to take notes, if they want to screenshot, they then have this framework that they can go off and do it themselves.
100%. So This is your title of the individual of your ICP. Up here is just sort of a generic idea of like what space you're operating in. So feel free to, I can just populate this if you want to, if there's any other chatting that needs to be done. Michael, of course, any other questions?
Yeah, perfect. We'll kind of power ahead. And then, if anything else comes up, then we can go back to that. So we have, next is lists. So this is something that a couple of people kind of chatted about or kind of chimed in the comments. One was around how do you kind of narrow down a list of 5,000 contacts that you have from a massive ebook campaign that you've done through marketing. And then there was one a little bit earlier. Let me go back. So that was the ebook campaign one. And then there was another one that, who was it? I said, oh yes, it was this, once you have all the contacts engaging with all the marketing material coming, this was EW that said this, and then they don't end up clicking schedule a demo. What do you do next? How do you capitalize on those MQLs? So same kind of Same kind of question. So yes, absolutely. A big part of this is capitalizing on the lists that marketing creates for you. So the lists that marketing creates are not every contact is going to fall within that ICP. It's going to be more along the total addressable market, if not people that aren't even in that market, just people that kind of register for whatever your content is because they're curious. So you've got to find a good way to kind of narrow down and reach out to them. So that ebook, that 5,000 contacts coming from an ebook example. So you need to have a very clear kind of list refining process. And that needs to include all these things that are included in the niche workshop that Patricia is running us through. So that industry, they need to be in the right industry, needs to be the right revenue count, right company head count. They need to be the right titles. That's probably all you need to cover to kind of refine that list into just the contacts that you need. And now say you've got this contact list that's kind of narrowed down from that 5,000, maybe it's 500. And then that feeds into this next question of what do you do with these market qualified leads who have never actually clicked that get started form? They've never gone anywhere. And the question was, do you have marketing retarget them or do you reach out through outbound? And it can be both. So what we do with at Predictable Revenue is every list that I target through outbound gets sent to the marketing team so that they can be targeting those same people through ads. So we're kind of hitting them from two sides there. But absolutely, having these people who have kind of engaged with your content is a warm in. You have a trigger for outreach. You have your relevance piece built in. You know what you need to reach out to them about. You're not just reaching out to them cold and having to follow this jobs to be done theory and kind of fabricate what you're reaching out about based on, of course, very educated guesses. You're able to say, hey, you attended this webinar. Hey, you registered for this. As far as the kind of structure for how you should kind of do that outreach, referring to this marketing content, Beck Holland is like the goddess on this. It's her personalization at scale method. Maybe Marisol can actually drop that in the YouTube comments. It's just on YouTube. So when she was at G2 Crowd, she did a personalization at scale webinar that is perfect. Like the kind of the template she uses for reaching out to people that have that trigger built in. It's a great, super simple, super concise email that refers to the trigger and goes from there. So I won't go too into the detail of the strategy there because you can find that. Beck Holland has done that. We also have a podcast and I believe a blog post of our own on building your own personalization at scale playbook. And I think this falls into that. So these mid-bounds are also, as Patricia said, some of your low-hanging fruit. These are not the true cold outbounds who have never heard of you. These are people who know of your brand, potentially see you as an expert in a space and are coming to you to learn things. So go after them. Do send your outbound, your SDRs after them. Don't just rely on marketing to retarget them, because absolutely there are people that they, of course, may not be ready to buy at that moment, but they know about you and they're further into that buying cycle than somebody completely cold will be. So you definitely want to capitalize on them. Any other thoughts on that?
No, you nailed that. So
Awesome.
there's like the dream personalization SDR style. No support needed from me there.
Thank you. Yeah, I encourage you guys to check out. Honestly, all of my strategies have been stolen from Beck Holland, so do check her out.
And then stolen from us. Like as in we steal them from you.
True. And so sales research and list building was the final thing that I wanted to touch on here. Of course, along the same vein as capitalizing from marketing, because you need to refine those lists. If you have somebody in the seat of sales researcher, or maybe if you've got like a sales intern or somebody who can spend a little bit of time doing some of the manual scraping or the manual list building, those lists from marketing are great ones to send to them to kind of weed through, pick out those people within that ideal customer profile and send them back to whoever's going to be doing that prospecting. But also if you're list building from scratch, so if you're actually building a list of contacts from nothing, whether you're just scraping the web or you have forums that you're looking at, or whether you're partnered with any of the data providers, when you have this really strong idea of who this ideal customer profile is, the list building all of a sudden, it makes sense in terms of the investment, because if you're paying per lead, if you're paying for contacts, you want to make sure that you're paying for a contact that really is that great fit.
Mhm.
And you guys
100%.
obviously, Patricia, do a lot of list building on behalf of our clients. That's one of the things that we do when we're prospecting for them. So yeah, tell me about kind of the list building process, or kind of how all this factors into that.
Absolutely. We are lucky that we have a phenomenal SR team that supports us. So, one thing that we do, as an example, if you do have some internal resources devoted to research or sales, and or you can draw from resources that you have with your SDRs, if you're able to allocate that role of SR to someone, or at least partially, it's really beneficial. And for us, like, we will include the sales research team. We will send them, a video, say, of this niche workshop you've done, include them in the conversations of what you're looking for, because then they not only are armed with the information they need to build a list, they might also come across things that you wouldn't have necessarily even thought of. And it's important to remember that when you are building your list, say you're skimming through looking for a certain title, and you notice that attached to that title, typically there might be a couple other factors, like say you're in, the digital space. Digital transformation and innovation are newer titles that are coming up and popping up and appearing. So what might traditionally have been, say, your director of IT might now be the director of digital transformation or innovation. That now that is the person to start targeting. So as you're list building, be cognizant of other little factors that appear in their title or appear in job descriptions. If you're looking at, say, as an example on LinkedIn, they have information around what they do in their job description. You might be able to pick keywords out of that now are starting to appear elsewhere, like following the data, follow your nose with trends that you're seeing. And we do often see in like these heavily saturated markets, being able to find a person that might have like an innovation style to their job description or their title is a great way to like optimize your lists as well. So looking for titles that might have other key things or components to them. Directors of IT are phenomenal as an example, but is there someone who would be more inclined to reach out to you about a new solution? So that's not necessarily around how we build lists. There's tons and tons of ways to build lists. I build lists for my clients. I have the SR team build lists for their clients. I'm lucky that I have a great bank of resources at my disposal. But if you're doing a grassroots operation, follow your nose, follow the trends, follow the data, especially if you're seeing that you're being referred to people. What are those titles you're being referred to? And so as you're building your list, provided that of course, like Sarah says, if you are paying for per lead or per prospect, ensure that you definitely have a solid understanding of your ICP, so you're not spending money, where you don't need to spend it. But if you're able to spend a lot of time researching unique titles that would support your efforts, I would definitely say spend some time there and really be thoughtful and critical of tracking your results, so that if there are trends that pop out the other end with titles, you are able to thus build better lists in the future.
Awesome. I'm going to take this opportunity to mention to everyone on the live stream right now that we're doing a really big giveaway in August. So you guys being live here are the first to know. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, comment, share, and like our videos from now until August 31st at 11:59 p.m. Pacific, you will be entered for a chance to be one of our winners. Let me tell you what you can win. First place winner, wireless Bose headphones. Coolest kid in your socially distanced gym, walking down the street where no one can see you because everyone's in their homes, on the Zoom calls. Everyone on Zoom calls will see you and know that you have the best headphones.
Or ignoring all your family members you're trapped with in a
exactly.
home. I can attest to that.
Really good noise canceling.
Yeah.
Okay, you could also win a 60-minute strategy session with Aaron Ross himself, and you can bring your team. Doesn't just have to be you. Bring out that whole sales team, bring out all your SDRs, bring out those managers, and see what you can get out of Aaron's brain in that 60 minutes. Finally, you can also win a copy of Predictable Revenue. Of course, that's kind of the foundation of our methodology, and it is a best-selling and award-winning book. Second and third place can win a 30-minute sales messaging rewrite session. So that's pretty interesting. That's kind of sort of a continuation down the jobs to be done theory, and kind of getting more granular on the actual messaging and execution side there. And you could also win another copy of Predictable Revenue. Perfect bedtime reading.
You get a book. Everybody gets a book.
Exactly. So you guys know. So to reiterate there, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, or you comment, or you share, or you like our videos, you are entered for a chance to win. And that contest is up on August 31st at 11:59 p.m. Pacific. Okay, moving on. I do see that we have one other comment around the referral approach from Edward, and I want to get to that. I want to save a little chunk at the end for some specific Q&A. I want to get back to that, but I do want to just chat a little bit first on the idea of continued development of your ideal customer profile. This is something that Patricia alluded to a little while back in the conversation here. There are a lot of things that change in the market or in the environment that impact your ideal customer profile, COVID being a prime example of one of those things. Tell me about that, Patricia.
I have to say the last 6, 8 months, I don't know at this point, every day blends into one. It could be 3 years, undecided, unclear. But that time frame where things, really happened very quickly. For our strategy side of things, although of course what is happening is just catastrophic, it has been very interesting to watch what happens with a market, what happens with ICP, all of that. So I'd be remiss to say that it hasn't impacted, I think, every client that we have. What is important to note here is that when you are looking at your ICP, be mindful in a situation like this of what people are dealing with. If you're noticing when you're prospecting, you're hearing a lot about furlough or being laid off, please, by all means, feel like you should drive into your team that you have to reply to these individuals and ensure that you are having a conversation around just how awful this is. And that is just something from a brand point of view and a human point of view that it is vitally important that you connect with people on a human level. If you are seeing that the ICP that you are working with predominantly in the past is no longer able to be active with you, it is time to pivot. It's time to look very critically at what you're offering, who you're offering it to, and how you need to strategize around that. As an example, do you have a need to have or a want to have service? Are you a boutique service or an add-on service that people might not necessarily have the budget for now? That doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. It doesn't mean you have to you don't be creative. But are you now focusing your outbound efforts on nurture? Are you focused on, of course, still prospecting people, but providing them information, resources, some of your time maybe it's just having conversations. I'd love to get you on the phone to talk about what you're dealing with. Because then what you can do is take that information internally and strategize, okay, so this is what our ICP is facing at the moment. How do we best support them? How do we best support what our solution can do for them moving forward? If you don't know what people are dealing with on a regular basis, you have to have those conversations. These will not be sales pitches. These will not be conversations about I think you need our product. It's let me understand. The more information gathering you can do, the better set you are in the future for when, of course, these buying cycles reappear. I have a bunch of clients that we spend a lot of time at the moment doing a lot of nurture, knowing that the buying cycle will happen. It's just not right now. Also, if you're recognizing that you do have a need to have service, product, whatever it might be, solution, then really, really drill down deep into the pain points here. So has your ICP changed? Has the decision maker changed? Have people that wouldn't necessarily be on the conversations before all of a sudden appearing on the conversations that you're having? Follow your nose with your data. Be really aware of the responses you're getting. Track the responses you're getting, whether you have a Google form that you're just dropping something in. Track what your ICP is doing and be very, very aware of the pain points in particular. So is this all of a sudden you have an influx of inbound? Ensure you're tracking those results as well to support your outbound effort. Of course, you don't want, I know a lot of people now that are being prospected are like, I'm so sick of seeing COVID appear in an email or a subject line. You don't have to present the situation at hand. Everyone knows what it is. But if you are spending enough time info gathering, you will be able to understand what your ICP needs. And if you have a need to have service, product, and whatnot, be very mindful of the fact that people are in a situation now where things are critical. And if you can help, by all means, recognize what it is that you do best, how you best support, and what people need, especially if it's just a few minutes of your time to understand your product or solution. Be prepared for those conversations and be prepared that they're not going to look the same as they did previously.
Absolutely. And say you have to pivot. Say it's something that you've just wanted to do anyway. It's not necessarily something that's come from this massive environmental shift like COVID. Either way, when you're kind of making that decision, you're kind of looking to branch out into these different potential ideal customer profiles or looking to change up your prospecting efforts or whatever it might be kind of around that ICP. You want to make sure that your decision is data-driven and not just anecdotal. Of course, the people that are on the front front lines who are having the actual back and forth with these prospects, with these clients, are the salespeople. So they're going to be your line of insight, both for that anecdotal and that data. So if you have a sales enablement tool, you want to look at the stats, you want to look at the metrics, like, did reply rates go down? What type of messaging has gone down? Who has stopped replying? If you kind of nailed this ideal customer profile, or you thought you did, and then you set out to do outbound and you never actually got the results you were looking for, set up some structured experimentation on who to target next. So never just kind of willy-nilly go for it, try, different messaging, different title, different industry. You really want to take this scientific approach to isolating for a single variable. Go all the way back to the beginning of this live stream where we talked about how you kind of land on an ICP to begin with, land on a different one, and then in a very structured way experiment with your outreach to these new people, because you want to make sure that you don't spend all that time and resources pivoting to something that's not going to work.
You're absolutely right with the variable component. Like, great suggestion. Don't change too much too quickly. Variable by variable, track, find your data. Yes, no, move forward. If you change everything, you don't know which part of the change worked. So be really mindful about how you're testing. That's phenomenal feedback.
Absolutely. And the last kind of piece of that is, as I mentioned there, the sales being that front line of who is kind of actually reaching out to those clients. Another vital component to this kind of continued work on your ideal customer profile is closing that gap between the sales and marketing team. So the sales team being on the front line, being the ones actually doing that outreach, the marketing generally being the ones who kind of write the copy, who kind of, in a way, design the outreach strategy. Maybe not the sequence design, but the kind of certainly the messaging a lot of times comes from marketing. So those two teams need to be joined at the hip, so that marketing is getting that constant feedback from sales of what's working and what's not. They can kind of pivot in their strategy on who they're targeting ads wise, and who they're bringing in for you for those midbound lists, so on and so forth. That's kind of sales. Closing the gap between sales and marketing is something that Predictable Revenue believes in firmly. And I think we could probably tack it onto any of our live streams about literally any subject, but I think it has a good spot in this one.
Yeah. You work hand in hand. You have to. There's no way those two jobs don't bleed together. And any opportunity you have to talk to someone who's literally engaging with your customer every day on the phone, in person, utilize those people. Please utilize those people. And ensure that your teams have opportunities to talk all regularly, especially because we're remote. I don't have to say that out loud for people to know it's a challenge, but ensure that they have brainstorming, freeform, conversations and opportunities to chat. And we are lucky; we have an insanely wonderful marketing team. So it makes, from the account strategy side, it's a dream.
Absolutely. That kind of brings us to the end of this Who You Should Prospect live stream. I want to open it up to some questions. So I do have this one from Edward that we're going to touch on now. And the rest of you guys that are listening, if you've got any more questions on anything we chatted about, drop them in now. So Edward Sanchez says, we offer a software solution to SMBs in a specific industry. Our customers are typically very loyal and big fans of our solution. How would you recommend specifically asking for referrals to similar companies that fit the ICP?
I would definitely suggest if you could name drop any of your current customers, or have case studies. This is where case studies are very valuable, because you have a bunch of stuff to lean on here. You've got a ton of success to lean on, especially if the life cycle of your client is quite long. People are sticking around for a long time. You've built a relationship. This is where relationship building is key. So if you know what your ICP is, you've got it really well ironed out. This is where case studies and name drops are vitally important to be able to refer to other new prospects. It gives you a solid leg to stand on.
Absolutely. Great advice. Wouldn't say a word different. Anything else from our wonderful viewers out there? Of course, if you don't think of it right now, you can also shoot Patricia or myself a message on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to chat with you about it. And maybe if there are kind of similar questions that come up, that's even a subject for a new live stream. So we're always welcome the feedback and the questions. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Edward. Thank you, everyone who participated and kind of shared with us. Thank you so much for attending the live stream. Everyone who listened, thank you for Patricia for being a wonderful expert on the live stream. Once more, I'm going to remind everybody about that big August giveaway. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment, share, like our stuff. and then you could win some really, really good prizes. But you got to get in there before August 31st at 11:59 p.m. PT.
That's it.
I think that's all from us today, folks. This has been a wonderful live stream. It's been so lovely having you here in our predictable revenue YouTube world. I hope
the
you all,
world of the internet.
yeah,
which we just live in a box now.
We all just live in, yeah,
live in a box now.
Yeah. So hope you guys all have great rests of your days.
Yeah.
See you again on the next one next week.
Everyone stay safe, stay well. It was lovely to be here, Sarah.